Incredible CEO grounded a plane after uncovering an outrageous 12-minute discrimination incident. The cabin thrummed with energy as Alex Turner, the 45-year-old CEO of a cutting-edge tech startup, settled into his seat. Anticipation hummed in the air, not just from the impending tech conference but from the weight of his responsibilities. His company was rapidly growing, carving out a space in an industry often riddled with inequality. That was why, above all, he felt the need to exemplify justice and integrity not only as a CEO but as a father and husband. Suddenly, a voice cut through the excitement. "I'm not sitting next to him," an entitled executive declared, casting a disdainful glance toward a talented African-American engineer. The words dripped with condescension. "He doesn't belong here." Alex's heart dropped. He hesitated as he absorbed the scene unfolding before him. A struggle brewed within, conflicting emotions roiling beneath the surface. He was a leader. He had always felt loyalty to the hierarchy, yet his core values screamed for justice. His hand instinctively clutched the armrest, knuckles whitening. As he gazed at the engineer's face, a mixture of shock and hurt evident. This was no isolated incident. It was a grim reminder of the systemic issues that pervaded the tech industry, issues he had vowed to fight against. Around him, chatter intensified, some passengers defending the engineer, others whispering threats about the consequences of challenging a powerful figure. The tension became palpable, a living thing writhing through the cabin. A thought struck him, igniting a deep sense of urgency. What would his children think? His daughter had once asked what courage looked like. Would he continue to let that child's question dissolve in the air, or would he embody the integrity he preached? Before he could gather his resolve, a hesitant voice murmured, "Maybe it's just best to leave it alone." A wave of frustration coursed through him. Leaning into the shared discomfort, he felt a swell of determination. The faces of his children, their innocence and hope, loomed large in his mind, pushing him toward action. "I can't let this pass," he muttered under his breath. Then, gathering all his courage, he rose. "This flight will not continue until we address what has just happened." Immediately, silence seized the cabin. A brief moment of disbelief before conversation erupted into a cacophony of support and dissent. Some applauded his stance, vertiginously uplifted by his bravery. Others exchanged glances of concern, uncertain what repercussions awaited them all, or worse, where this might lead their careers. A maelstrom of voices engulfed Alex, debris from a battlefield of ideologies. The fight for dignity clashed against a fixation on stability and corporate loyalty. He wavered for just a moment. Was he prepared to be this man, the one causing disruption? What about the executives waiting for him in San Francisco? Before he could delve deeper into his hesitation, he remembered the late-night discussions with his wife, the laughs shared over how they could shape a better future for their children. "You need to stand up for what's right," he once told her, creating internal friction as he questioned whether he could hold on to that truth now. "We can't just sit back and let it happen," he shouted, a desperate urgency pushing out through the turmoil inside him. But in that moment of passion, the plane jolted, turbulence reminding everyone that there were larger forces at play. The shaking felt far too symbolic, as if the very foundations of their thoughts were teetering on the edge. In that tightening grip of fear, doubt seeped in. Alex's heart raced as he realized that this was about more than one engineer's dignity. It was about the very essence of leadership, the call to redefine success in an unequal world. All eyes turned towards him, the atmosphere thickening with expectancy. What would he do next? He was lost in tumultuous thought, waiting for a chance to reclaim the narrative before it slipped away. The stakes felt impossibly high. There was no turning back now. A tightening silence enveloped the cabin, and Alex could feel beads of sweat forming at his temples as the weight of the gaze fell upon him. Each pair of eyes reflected a tumult of emotions: curiosity, hostility, and, for a few, a glimmer of hope. He steadied his breath, the tumult in his gut mingling with the rising urgency around him. Moments earlier, he had teetered on the edge of history or disaster. Now, realization sliced through the uncertainty. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in decorum. It was about dismantling a culture of silence. "Listen," he called, raising his voice with fervor. "What happened here isn't merely an isolated incident, it's a symptom of a deeper problem. This isn't just about one man's right to sit, but about our responsibility to stand together against discrimination in all its forms." His words hung in the air, sending ripples through the crowd. A few murmurs of agreement emerged, but the clenching jaws and narrowed eyes of the doubters reminded him of how precarious his position was. What if engaging with this ugly truth, with this unyielding facade, resulted in professional suicide? A cacophony of what-ifs flooded into his thoughts, each one weighing him down as surely as the aircraft beneath them. But there was a different voice in his head now, a guiding compass forged in sleepless nights filled with strategic planning and family discussions on justice. He could almost hear his daughter asking him again and again what it meant to be brave, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. "Don't you see?" he pressed, eyes scanning the cabin. "If we let this go unchecked, what message are we sending? That someone's worth can be called into question based on the color of their skin? That ambition is reserved only for those who fit a certain mold?" The tension morphed, people shifting in their seats, the initial shock transforming into an intriguing energy. A voice from the back piped up, shaking with passion. "You're right. We can't let ourselves be complicit. This has to change." Clapping erupted, hesitant at first, then increasingly steady. The executives in the cabin exchanged uneasy glances. Their allegiance to the status quo rattled in a matter of moments. How far would Alex's initiative go? Just beneath the applause, he sensed their discomfort that could boil over into real consequences. Not just to him, but to the entire organization he had painstakingly built. As the cabin buzzed, he seized the moment. "I want every single one of us to think deeply about our own prejudices, the quiet things we excuse or ignore. I urge you to engage with this discomfort. It's the first step in defining what kind of leaders we aspire to be." He could feel his heartbeat in his throat now. Words had power, but they also evoked consequences, and Alex knew the road ahead was steep. Was he truly leading this charge, or merely clutching at an idealized version of himself? Every ounce of confidence flickered in the face of potential backlash from his peers. Rolling the dice on such high stakes felt reckless, yet cowardice felt even more threatening. An executive standing nearby finally broke the silence, voice icy with authority. "You may put the company at risk, Alex. Do you really believe this will bear fruit?" His insides nodded. That was the question. Did he want to be a CEO of a successful company, or a beacon of hope that could inspire a movement within tech? Before he could answer, the turbulence intensified, shaking the aircraft more violently than before, echoing the quake of uncertainty within him. All at once, he realized, he was standing at a fork in the road. He could either cling to the known path, preserving his position and influence, or take a step into the unknown, weaving through the turbulence in pursuit of a greater cause. He glanced around, taking in the faces, all of them representatives of not only his company but of a fractured industry. They were waiting for him to decide. What awaited him at the end of this journey? Would he emerge as a leader ready to dismantle barriers, or would he falter under the weight of tradition? He felt as though he were standing at the precipice of a revelation, daring to dive into uncharted territory, where the choices made this day would ripple through the industry for years to come. With uncertainty surging, Alex took a deep breath, eyes locked on the executive who dared question him. The time has come to face what we've ignored for too long. And with that, he felt the shift begin not just in the cabin but within himself. What would he discover about his true calling? The buzzing applause had barely faded when a question lingered in Alex's mind, echoing his self-doubt. What now? He had ignited curiosity and possibly camaraderie, yet the undertow of apprehension rumbled just beneath the surface. He realized there was no manual for navigating the chaos he had chosen to embrace, no clear instructions on managing the fledgling hope he'd ignited. As the plane stabilized, Alex felt the weight of his peers' expectations. They needed him to steer the ship, but the direction of that navigation remained hazy. Would they follow him into the storm he had conjured? Or was this gale force more than they were willing to endure? He recentered himself, determined to break through the complex web of doubt now binding him. He turned back to the group, voice steady but tinged with urgency. We can't undo the past, but we can create a path forward. What we need now is a plan, commitments that go beyond today's conversation and transform into lasting change. Several executives nodded, still steeped in uncertainty but visibly motivated. He scanned the room for allies, finding those whose earlier murmurs had fueled his bravado. They were the seeds of a new movement. But he knew that enthusiasm could quickly turn cold without concrete steps. He could feel the burden of their scrutiny, the implicit question hanging in the air. What will you do next, Alex? An idea began to crystallize. Let us form a task force, he proposed. A dedicated team focused on diversity and inclusion within our management levels, people from all backgrounds contributing to the company's culture. The idea rolled around the cabin, and for a brief moment, the atmosphere shifted from skepticism to possibility. He saw nods from some, the gears turning in their heads, but he also noted the resistance lingering in the corners. The executive who had challenged him earlier, arms crossed defensively, remained an obstacle. What is the task force going to accomplish, Alex? Are you just looking for a pat on the back? Or are we serious about this? She shot back, her tone sharp enough to cut through the hopeful hum. His heart raced, the familiar taste of anxiety rising again. Yet the words came as if on cue from an unchained part of himself. It's about accountability. We need to build a system that holds us to higher standards, not just suggestions, but implications for our careers if we fail to uphold these values. Can be tough, but that's exactly what makes it worthwhile. What surprised him was the boldness of his statement, the steely resolve that coursed through his voice. The anger that flickered within him didn't seek revenge. It sought change. He could feel the apprehension of others lessen, and for the first time, he saw admiration reflected back at him. Still, Alex recognized the road to real transformation was riddled with unseen challenges. He understood that these decisions would not only shape the workplace but also redefine his identity as a leader. Implicit fear whispered warnings of retaliation of loyalists to the old systems who might seek to undermine him or his vision. He didn't have answers for all the obstacles ahead, but he started identifying not just the risks of their current inertia, but also the real costs of inertia itself. What would happen to their reputation if they remained stagnant? What legacy would they leave? For the first time, as the clouds cleared and the sun filtered into the cabin windows, Alex felt a surge of clarity. He was ready to embrace the challenge ahead. It felt like stepping to the edge of a vast ocean, vast and frightening, yet brimming with possibilities. The cabin remained densely quiet, but as eyes locked in on him, their similarities began to blend into something profound, an unspoken agreement to move forward. Little did he know, the aircraft's descent mirrored his journey back, not just metaphorically but as a tether to the rewards of deep vulnerability. Then, just as he thought he had gained a firm grip on their aspirations, a radical thought struck him. What if our task force included not only our employees but also community members, people impacted by our biases? He inhaled sharply. The audacity of his own suggestions startled him. Would they dare bring outsiders into their folded world? He could feel a heavy shift in the air, and with it came the scent of potential upheaval. But the lingering doubt still whispered in his ear, begging for caution. If they opened their doors to those voices, what other transformations might occur? He had begun the road of personal development, but now he felt on the cusp of a much larger journey, one that could lead to true systemic change or significant backlash from those who thrived in the shadows of silence. With resolve hardening, Alex contemplated his next words carefully. The stakes were high, but it was time to find out if he had the courage to fully confront both his fears and the collective fear of those around him. Let us break down those barriers and involve those we've overlooked for so long, he declared, heart racing. This could be the moment that defines who we are as an organization. The tension crackled with uncertainty. Would they step with him into this uncharted paradigm, or retreat back into comfortable routines? He could already tell that the path forward was going to test every part of him from here on out. The silence enveloped the cabin, thick with apprehension. Alex's words hung in the air, vibrating with the challenge he had just issued. He sensed the vulnerability in the faces of his peers, a blend of intrigued and anxious expressions. This was not just a proposal. It was a call to action, potentially shaking the very foundations of their corporate structure. But with that call came the weight of unknown consequences. He could feel the pulse of his own fear quaking beneath his skin. What if they rejected the idea? What if admitting outsiders into their world was a fatal error? Those thoughts threatened to unravel the fragile sliver of hope he had kindled. As he scanned the room, a flicker of resolve steadied his resolve. He needed to communicate the gravity of this moment. We have an opportunity to redefine our narrative, but it begins with us admitting our flaws, he urged, his voice firm with urgency. If we continue to operate in silos, how can we expect to understand or address the needs of those who look to us for leadership? The executive who had challenged him, the one with arms crossed, defensively shifted her stance slightly, opening the door just a crack. Alex recognized that as a sign of potential engagement. But he knew he needed to consolidate this momentum and transform it into tangible action. We need to establish clear objectives for this task force, he stated, his mind racing to organize the chaos of thoughts swirling through him. I propose we start by gathering input directly from those impacted by our decisions. By bringing them to the table, we can cultivate a deeper understanding of the true barriers we need to dismantle. Another executive, a newcomer within the ranks, leaned in with curiosity. How do you envision this task force operating, Alex? We've primarily functioned behind closed doors where decisions were made in isolation. Exactly, he said, urgency spiking his passion. We need transparency and accountability. This task force could serve not just to guide company policy, but also foster broader connections within the community. We'll ensure that no voice is marginalized. The implications of our decisions impact far beyond ourselves. He could see the gears turning in their heads. Some began leaning closer, intrigued but still cautious. Others appeared skeptical, resistant to disturbing the status quo they'd been accustomed to. Yet, despite the mixed responses, Alex felt a small flicker of excitement swell in his chest. In taking this leap, he realized he was not only initiating a professional endeavor, he was embarking on a personal transformation. The stakes were elevating, and he was committed to redefining who he was in their eyes both as a leader and as a person. He recalled a conversation with his mentor about leadership and vulnerability. True leaders aren't just the ones with the answers, but those willing to ask questions with their hearts on the line. He clung to that lesson now, the pulse of determination steadying his resolve. There will be resistance, he continued. But resistance indicates we're challenging norms, the very inertia that has held us back. It's uncomfortable, but discomfort is often where the greatest growth emerges. A soft murmur of agreement rippled through part of the group, yet skepticism remained palpable among the others. Outside voices could lead to dissent against entrenched hierarchies. Would my colleagues voice support for the vulnerable, or turn the tide against him to protect their own interests? With no immediate answer, Alex inhaled deeply, steeling himself. His idea was both audacious and necessary, but he committed to openly addressing each concern raised. He had to face not just their fears, but his own as well. Let us commit to discussions. Let us be uncomfortable, he urged, conviction weaving into his words. If we all advocate for our corporate responsibility to the broader society, we might just find our way through this maze together. The room erupted in a mix of cautious nods and bemused expressions. This was the tipping point of not just his professional journey, but a pivotal growth catalyst. Feasting on the uncertainty, Alex realized he was standing at the edge of a precipice. His next step determined to sway not only his future, but the entire organization's trajectory. The question loomed. Would they leap with him or watch him fall? As he felt their gazes shift, weighing what lay ahead, Alex concluded the moment was ripe for challenges both internal and external. The thrill of the unknown mingled with apprehension still clung to him. What would be the fallout from making such bold choices? One phrase echoed in his mind. Pregnant with urgency, the next steps he would take would define both his character and the potential for meaningful change. But would he find the courage to move forward when faced with inevitable resistance? Suddenly, chaos interrupted their discussions as alarms blared outside. Signaling an undeniable crisis, the plane was forced to land early due to an unexpected situation. For Alex, everything shifted in an instant. There was no turning back now. What awaited him on the ground would test not just their corporate resolve but the very core of his leadership. Did the chaos outside mimic the internal storm that raged within? He had no way of knowing, but uncertainty gripped him as the cabin shook, leaving him with one desperate thought. Would he rise to meet the challenges or remain grounded, shackled by fear? The plane jolted violently, and the overhead lights flickered ominously, casting an eerie glow in the cabin. Alex's heart raced as he grappled with the reality of the emergency landing. The alarm's blaring siren filled the cabin, rendering all conversations futile. His colleagues, wide-eyed and murmuring in confusion, mirrored the chaos swirling in his mind. Alex's mind raced through a myriad of thoughts. Beneath the surface, his fears spiraled. Was this turbulence a sign of deeper issues trapped within the organization's foundations? Could it be interpreted as a test, a prelude to the internal upheaval he was so fervently seeking to instigate? Each jolt of the aircraft matched the tumult within him. The urgency of his message, the hesitation of his peers, and now, the absolute necessity for decisive leadership. As the plane began its descent, Alex instinctively sought momentum. His internal dialogue escalated a need to channel the mounting anxiety into a strategic framework for his objectives. What if this incident could serve as a catalyst, breaking the chains of complacency? He clenched his fists, mentally organizing his surroundings. This was his moment to harness the adrenaline, to rise as the leader he aspired to be. "All right, everyone, we need to focus," he called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "We have a situation here, but let us not let it paralyze us. We need to prepare for landing, and then for whatever awaits us next. We might have been forced into this space together for a reason." The murmurs died down, a fragile attention momentarily drawn towards him. The alarm continued to wail in the background, but he pushed forward. "Use this to reflect on our upcoming discussions. We've been given an unexpected opportunity to face uncertainty. Embrace it." A few nods from the crowded cabin encouraged him, even as others remained skeptically aloof, trapped within their fears. He could practically see some of them retreating into their safe zones, unwilling to engage with the unfamiliarness of their situation. Alex felt the weight of his responsibilities intensify. He had to guide them not just through the landing but through the emotional turbulence that would inevitably follow. As a leader, hadn't he always known that navigating the plane was just part of the journey? So much of the real work lay in the aftermath, in managing the fallout, in fostering resilience among his peers. They arrived on the ground with a jarring thud, the abrupt stop rousing a cacophony of nervous laughter and sighs of relief. Alex's focus sharpened. He took a deep breath to steady himself. Once they completed the safety protocols, he gathered his colleagues just outside the cabin. He could sense they were shaken, not just from the plane's rough landing but by the impending tension in their professional discourse. The air felt thick with unspoken doubts. "Listen," he began, taking a moment to scan their faces. "This experience has forced us out of our comfort zone. It's a microcosm of the issues we face within our organization. If we can weather this storm together, we can tackle anything. That's how true leadership transforms fear into opportunity." Silence enveloped them again, this time almost reverent, like a collective contemplation rising from the ashes of fear. Alex's gamble rested on this moment. The previous challenge he issued loomed larger now. Would they dismiss it as a fleeting thought, or would they dare to seize it? This was the ultimate test of his emerging leadership. Could he inspire a shared vision, or would they cling to the familiar fragmentation of their roles? An executive tentatively stepped forward. "If we can face a crisis like this, we can face the challenges of our leadership. I want to be part of this movement." Alex felt a stir inside him, igniting a flicker of hope. But then doubt pulled at him again. What if this was an isolated sentiment? What if others stayed rooted in their fearing departure from long-established norms? Would he be able to sustain this newfound momentum? Then let us channel this energy, he replied, rallying his courage. We'll meet tonight to plan our next steps. I need every one of you on board. This is our collective chance to break free from silence. Starting right now. As the conversation shifted and grew around him, Alex felt the weight begin to lift. New possibilities unfurled in front of him. He had ignited a flame. Now he just needed to keep it burning. But beneath the buzz of newfound determination lurked an unsettling realization. Past decisions had consequences that might unravel everything. What had he truly set in motion? The darkness of doubt slipped back in, lingering like a shadow waiting to strike. Unbeknownst to him, outside forces were already conspiring against his every intention, reminding him that every revolution comes with its own set of trials, a truth he could not ignore. As they dispersed into the evening twilight, Alex felt both empowered and vulnerable, grappling with a truth that had emerged from the chaos. The battle was just beginning. Would the foundations he sought to reshape endure the pressure about to mount against them? As darkness fell, giving way to a quiet twilight that enveloped the air around the airport, Alex found himself standing alone momentarily after dispersing his colleagues. The gravity of the situation was still unfurling in his mind. He was now a catalyst for change, albeit one who felt unsteady just steps away from obliterating the status quo. The demands of leadership were heavy on his shoulders, engulfed in uncertainty and vulnerability. Firing up to gather everyone again felt energizing yet daunting. This wasn't merely about drafting a plan for improvement. It involved breaking through the inertia firmly established by years of comfort, complacency, and a realization that crept over him like a damp fog, possibly even complicity. Letting the buzz of the earlier conversations fade, he sought solitude, retreating into a quiet corner of the terminal. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, trying to push out the diaphanous anxieties that clung to him. What he felt was a pang of apprehension. There was a fear that, once the initial panic subsided, the enthusiasm would wane, revealing deeper fissures in the culture they had become accustomed to. With his eyes still shut, flashes of the landing replayed in his mind. The momentary panic of securing identity amidst chaos felt too poignant. Was he simply trying to hype his colleagues? Or was there a genuine desire to transform their complacent culture? In retrospect, the realization struck him. The emergency wasn't just the plane's turmoil. It was reflective of the larger organizational turbulence that remained unexamined, festering quietly. He paced in the dim light, suddenly filled with determination again. The chaos wasn't an enemy. It was a profound opportunity. How could he not only lead them through this but expose the deeper fissures waiting to be uncovered in their workplace? He had been neglecting the strength of vulnerability, the very command crucial for authentic leadership. What if he opened a dialogue about the elephants in the room? Past grievances buried under corporate niceties? Those abiding feelings of discrimination that always lingered just out of sight? He chuckled darkly to himself. Maybe this isn't just about planning. It's about confronting. The road to authentic change began with a willingness to tackle discomfort. He might face resistance, but he understood. Change comes not just through strategy, but through honesty and collective courage. Alex stepped back into the terminal, and he felt the air change. The atmosphere shifted, charged with the energy left in the wake of their earlier discussions. All right, let us talk about what has been unspoken, he announced as he gathered everyone again. Their faces still reflected the little apprehensions of the tumultuous landing. Yet he saw a rekindled spark of eagerness, especially in the executive who had first stepped forward. It's time we confront our deeper conflicts, the ones that have held us back. This isn't just a nice-to-have conversation. We've experienced turbulence today, and it's a miracle we are all here. Are we willing to explore the discomfort that lies within our organization? Some shifted uneasily, others leaned in closer, intrigued yet apprehensive. Alex noted the few still reluctant to engage. He began to wonder if these discussions might awaken something in them. Facing this truth might turn repulsion into resolution. We may realize that what we avoid, intentionally or not, could hold the key to our future and could be what unifies us. The words hung in the air, crisp and charged, beckoning forward a new potential. I understand that for many, this isn't merely uncomfortable. It's terrifying. What if we fail? But tell me this, what if we succeed? What if we reshape our narrative into something greater than what exists right now? As the collective gaze sharpened, Alex felt the tide shift. He couldn't overlook that this moment may either define him or see him crumble under pressure. But there lingered a gnawing realization. Not everyone might be on board, and hidden forces remained unwilling to depart from the status quo. Would resistance arise from within the organization, or would external pressures retaliate against the turmoil that his revelations would surely incite? They nodded, murmuring in agreement, yet the walls of doubt shadowed their willingness to embrace the forthcoming conflict. The tender flame he ignited flickered precariously, just as the shadows loom large in an uncertain night. As they delved deeper into conversation, Alex's attention split between the dynamic unfolding before him and the nagging voice whispering that courage might not be enough. What were the unseen obstacles that still awaited? With a resolve now underscoring every breath, Alex understood that true change would wield its own battles. He would navigate them. But the question loomed larger than any strategy. A whisper quietly demanded reckoning. As they began outlining initial steps, an urgent message buzzed on his phone, demanding his immediate attention. Alex fumbled with the device, the bright screen illuminating the challenge ahead. An ongoing crisis within the organization had just escalated. Could he balance these burgeoning tensions while maintaining his ambition for transformation? The time had come to confront not just the turbulence beneath, but the very essence of how far he was willing to go to lead his colleagues through the storm. The message continued to flash insistently, and Alex's heart raced. He glanced up from the screen, surveying the room filled with colleagues still tethered between hope and anxiety. This wasn't just about understanding their emotional fractures. Now, a new crisis threatened to divert their attention before they could even begin to address the deep-rooted issues. The text detailed an incident in the operations department. A discriminatory comment had been made by one supervisor against an employee, belittling their contributions in front of others. The timing couldn't have been worse right after the potential for a culture shift had been ignited. Alex felt a mix of indignation and concern ripple through him. This was not just a violation of company values. It was a clear reflection of the workplace dynamics he had hoped to confront and transform. The insidious nature of such comments, he realized, had created an environment where issues like this could fester unseen. He clenched his jaw, recognizing the urgency in taking immediate action. "I'm sorry, everyone. I need a moment," he said, stepping away from the group. The vibrant energy that had once filled the room was now tinged with uncertainty. As he moved toward a quieter corner, he recalled the faces of the shocked employees caught up in this cycle of discrimination and silence. Each face echoed back the fear he saw mirrored within himself. What kind of leader could he be if he allowed such a moment to slip by without direct confrontation? The time for hesitation was over. He felt profound pressure to act decisively. With his hands resting on the cool tiles of the terminal floor, he breathed deeply, allowing the internal chaos to coalesce into clarity. He recognized how pivotal this moment was not just for the employee affected, but for the collective mindset of the organization. It was a chance to call forth honesty, to encourage openness about unacceptable behaviors, invigorating the change he envisioned. But it required authenticity, his authenticity. Returning to the group, he took a deep breath, mustering the courage that had ignited days before. "I've just received some troubling news regarding a discriminatory incident in our operations department," he announced, his voice steady, though the gravity of his words hung palpably in the air. "This is not just a lapse in judgment. It speaks to the larger issues we've brushed under the rug. This moment requires us to confront what we've been too afraid to talk about." Murmurs spread through the room. Alex scanned the faces, searching for acceptance or readiness, but met with a mix of apprehension and acknowledgement. "We can choose to acknowledge it now, take accountability, or let it repeat itself and poison our workplace culture, he continued. We must stand together to set an example. This isn't merely about restructuring, it's about reconstructing our values. The challenge lay before them starkly. Alex felt an unexpected surge of energy within. He realized some might see his approach as an act of rebellion against their long-entrenched norms, but he was determined to press on. The fear of reprisal gripped him. He understood that resistance could arise from those unwilling to relinquish the status quo. But this discomfort was necessary. Resolute change required a stark confrontation of what lay beneath. Apologies, a few of us need to engage with the situation directly, he directed towards a small group in leadership he respected deeply. Find out the truth, address those involved, and put a plan in motion. This is about more than a single comment. Let us unravel this culture of silence that lurks beneath our surface. Fear may have been overshadowed by resolve, but he had no illusions about the complexity of this challenge. How would the reaction unfold? Would there be pushback from leadership who felt exposed? Conflict inevitably surged forward as they embarked into territory that had long been avoided. With his heart racing, Alex felt the stakes rise. Each moment from here could carve the pathways for his development as a leader or send him spiraling into doubt. But determination surged within him stronger than fear. Would they bind together toward embracing these changes, or would they revert to the very complacency he sought to dismantle? The path had never been clearer, yet the hurdles appeared insurmountable. As the group prepared to step into the uncomfortable yet necessary debate, Alex received a follow-up notification. A larger division had learned about the incident and were preparing for backlash. This new wave of tension threatened not only to derail their efforts but could also endanger the nascent transformation he tried to ignite. Did he have the strength to wield this crisis as a turning point, or would the weight of resistance buckle him under? The question echoed in his mind. Change was now in the air, but so were the unmistakable shadows. Could he maneuver effectively through the storm, or would his efforts dissolve in the winds of doubt? Alex stood at the edge of the conference room, the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. The flicker of worry in his colleague's eyes reminded him of the vast chasm still separating intention from action. He had dared to ignite the conversation, but now doubts crept in. Would his attempt to address the incident unravel quicker than he hoped? His phone buzzed again, and another notification rattled his nerves. A branch of the operations department publicly condemned the supervisor's comment, labeling it as a deep-rooted issue that mirrored a failure of leadership. They were ready to confront the crisis, but Alex felt unease. Was he prepared to back this uprising? What if their rebellion against the status quo fell flat or spiraled into chaos? He took a moment to breathe, each inhale a tentative affirmation of his resolve. The air in the room had shifted. It felt electric, charged with a mixture of dread and anticipation. He needed a plan, a strategy to harness the surge of emotion while steering the conversation towards constructive dialogue. Drawing from his reflections, he envisioned a workshop, a safe space where employees could candidly express their own experiences and frustrations rather than deflect their truths. He envisioned opening the notebooks of fear and shame that had long been closed by the burden of silence. All right, let us address this directly, he announced, leaning again into the energy radiating from the group. My idea is to establish a series of workshops for everyone. A forum where we can safely discuss our experiences about discrimination, address not only behaviors but the underlying culture that allows it to persist. Shifting expressions emerged from the team. Some appeared skeptical while others showed interest. Questions began to filter through like sunlight breaking through clouds. How will that help? One voice questioned. Won't that just stir up more tension? Alex engaged with the inquiry head-on, recognizing it as a crack in the armor of doubt. Yes, it may stir tension, but only through discomfort can we spark genuine transformation. We cannot gloss over these issues, we must confront them. Would his strategy be met with resistance from those entrenched in their positions of comfort? He couldn't suppress the tremor of doubt that flickered within him. This wasn't just about presenting solutions. It was about nurturing a willingness to face the rawness of their realities together. The room soon filled with a kaleidoscope of perspectives. Some voiced personal stories, recounting microaggressions or explicit biases they had endured over the years. Others took a more strategic approach, analyzing how policies that appeared equitable could be manipulatively upheld by the very leaders who promised change. Each narrative planted seeds of urgency within Alex. The fear of silence became more than just an individual burden. It was the collective weight of a culture reluctant to evolve. With listening came opportunity, and Alex felt each moment ripple with newfound potential. It pushed him to reconsider his role. He could no longer be merely a shepherd guiding others. He had to lead with unflinching vulnerability, showcasing his own shortcomings and biases alongside them. Yet a pivotal question lingered: how would the higher-ups react to this shift? Would they see his methods as a renegotiation of power, a push against their authority? Tactfully navigating this delicate landscape would require precision, and each small success would bring both affirmation and doubt as the potential for pushback loomed. He felt the pulse of his leadership journey quicken, bracing for the turmoil that awaited. As he formulated a follow-up meeting with the executive team, he questioned whether he could summon the courage to articulate the urgency of this change in the face of growing backlash. The stakes had risen considerably. With a blend of anticipation and trepidation, he knew he stood at a precipice. Each decision would cultivate either the emergence of a new culture or the continuation of stagnation. The time for half measures was over. A clearer path demanded action. But would he rise to the occasion, leading and challenging his fears as he sought authentic engagement? Or would his efforts be swept aside as mere talk in a storm of discontent? The answer awaited him in the next confrontation. The air hummed with expectation as Alex prepared for his meeting with the executive team. The conference room felt more intimidating than ever. The polished table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reflecting a stark contrast to the turmoil in his mind. He glanced at the clock, a countdown, a reminder that moments of clarity often vanquished when the pressure surged. In the back of his mind, he replayed the voices from the workshop. Their stories lingered like echoes, persistent reminders of why he needed to push this change. Each narrative was both a challenge and an opportunity. The stakes he had felt were no longer abstract. They were personal. He had made the decision to lead not from authority but from shared experience. But as he sat in that conference room, doubt clawed at him. Was it enough to just understand? What if his vulnerability was perceived as weakness? What if it fueled further resistance? He shook his head, attempting to dispel the negative spirals. Been there, done that, he muttered to himself, a self-affirmation buried under the weight of uncertainty. As the executives began to filter in, Alex noticed their demeanor, some engaged, others inherently dismissive. He read the room, and it felt like an uneven stage, with wary glances and heavy arms folded across chests. In that moment, he recognized the power dynamics at play. He was not only challenging the status quo but daring to confront the very individuals who had perpetuated it. "Thank you everyone for coming," he began, his voice steady yet layered with anticipation. He noticed his hands, slightly trembling as they gripped the agenda. "I want to discuss some moments that came up in the workshops, focusing on our organizational culture." He derived strength from the thought of those who had shared their truth. "We have the opportunity to address more than just isolated incidents. It's about understanding systemic issues and personal accountability." A murmured dissent fluttered through the room. An executive leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "You're suggesting we air our dirty laundry? That sounds catastrophic." Alex felt his blood rush. He was at a crossroads: how to navigate hostility without succumbing to it. Not airing dirty laundry, but confronting it. We must create the environment for open dialogue, or how can we expect change? The silence has only perpetuated a culture of fear. The words rolled off his tongue with unexpected conviction, but beneath the surface, he wrestled with the implications. Would they see the merit in honesty, or would they retreat to their comfort zones? "Can't we just issue a policy revision? This sounds like a rabbit hole," another executive remarked, brushing off his suggestions as trivial. A familiar sensation of frustration washed over him, yet he steadied his breath. That might ease the surface discomfort, but it doesn't fix the underlying issues. We need real solutions, ones that acknowledge our failures and lead to healing. Alex's heart raced, aware that his words could either rally or alienate, depending on their willingness to engage. He sensed the room shift. Conversations rippled, fueling unrest among a group that preferred strategic avoidance. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about all those who sought validation in their struggles. He pressed on with newfound fervor. If we don't challenge ourselves to be uncomfortable, we're destined to repeat the same mistakes. Change requires us to step outside of our established norms. The atmosphere grew electric, tension palpable as colleagues wrestled with his proposition. An executive's eyes sharpened, her posture shifting. This isn't just about confronting unpleasant truths, is it? You're feigning a movement while you might be undermining authority. The accusation stung, but Alex simmered internally, ready to stand his ground. On the contrary, I'm here to transform authority into a partnership, one that prioritizes empathy over tradition. As soon as the words left his mouth, he felt them reverberate, shifting the balance within himself. But the challenge remained. Would he be allowed to facilitate this transformation? Or would the executives go back to business as usual? The lure of complacency hung heavily in the air. As the silence stretched, Alex's heart drummed against his ribs. Clarity began to crystallize within him. The pulsating tension was his catalyst. It was the moment to redefine leadership not as a distance from the people but as a bridge to connect through understanding and vulnerability. And then he thought, the time had come to face both the voice of discontent and the echo of his resolve. Would he seize this moment to solidify his leadership or falter under the weight of institutional resistance? The answer loomed precariously close with the choice in his hands. But what would be the cost of this confrontation? Would it expose him to further vulnerability or unlock hidden potential? In a room heavy with decision, the tension thickened, awaiting resolution. As the echoes of his provocative words settled over the conference room, a charged silence loomed, punctuated only by the distant hum of life outside. Alex felt the weight of uncertainty tie knots in his stomach. He had drawn the line. Now he had to find out if his colleagues were willing to step across it with him. Gradually, one executive raised their hand. You've raised valid points, Alex. I've seen the disconnect between our policies and the experiences of our employees. If we're going to foster genuine growth, we need to take steps to not only reassess our values but also implement key changes. The air shifted. Signs of hope mingled with lingering skepticism. What specifically do you propose? Another executive asked carefully, as if they were wading through uncharted waters. Alex seized this moment. Here lay the crux of his challenge: how to turn dialogue into tangible action. We need more than just policy changes. We need a commitment to ongoing dialogue, Alex replied, feeling back the thrill of momentum building in the room. I propose an ongoing series of workshops where all employees can share their experiences openly. We also need to establish accountability protocols to ensure that discriminatory behavior isn't just condemned but dealt with seriously. By holding ourselves to these standards, we can truly evolve as a tech company. A flicker of hesitance crossed the faces around him, but the tide was turning. We can't just hope for change to occur. It's incumbent upon us to be proactive and to step toward the uncomfortable while ensuring every voice carries weight. The room reverberated with murmurs of endorsement. Eyes darted among one another, weighing the necessity of the proposed changes against the fear of upheaval. Change starts with us. We need to pioneer this in a way that brings others in rather than push them away. He added, the conviction swelling in his chest, the weight of responsibility now transforming into lighter air. Little by little, he saw expressions shift from skepticism to consideration, and finally resolve as the conversation progressed. Let us create a task force, suggested one colleague. A group dedicated to steering not only these workshops but also implementing strategies for accountability within our ranks. Yes, Alex interjected, this task force should be diverse and inclusive, featuring voices from all areas of the company, including those who have faced discrimination. With each incremental agreement, Alex felt an undercurrent of pride building in him. He was leading a charge that pushed against the established norms that persisted for far too long. Questions continued to arise. How do you foresee measuring the effectiveness of these workshops? How do we ensure our willingness to engage translates into action? Alex responded with renewed conviction. We will take pre- and post-workshop surveys, establishing benchmarks for emotional and cultural changes among staff. We'll track our research about workplace sentiment regarding diversity and inclusion. Most importantly, we'll make these outcomes part of regular leadership reviews. Analyzing the faces in the room, Alex could see something pivotal unfolding: a recognition that their organizational legacy depended on embracing the transformative path he had catalyzed. It was a revelation that came at a cost but could yield profound rewards. He felt exhilarated. Each idea sparked conversations that forged a collective vision. The fear that initially paralyzed him began to ebb away, replaced with a sense of unity and purpose. They were no longer individuals separate by titles and positions, but rather partners in a revolutionary endeavor, pioneers on the brink of forging a new culture. With the meeting's momentum behind them, they turned to crafting action items that would formalize their plans. Alex sketched notes and recorded commitments with a zeal resonating with anticipation. At that moment, as they finalized the resolutions that would turn their narratives into actions, he could vividly sense the culture shifting. Attitudes that had once been steeped in complacency began to crack under the pressure of truth. As the meeting adjourned, Alex felt a wave of gratitude and fulfillment wash over him. He had emerged from the eye of the storm transformed, not just as a leader fighting for change, but also as a man committed to redefine success not just by outcomes, but by integrity and shared growth. He stepped outside into the crisp evening air, the sun's dying rays warming his skin. It marked not only a personal victory, but was also a profound moment of shared responsibility for everyone involved. The shadows of doubt that had previously loomed now felt lighter against the possibility of a brighter future. Alex marveled at how far he'd come. From a conflicted CEO on a plane to a conscious leader, not just advocating for justice but embodying it, capable of instilling change within a corporate structure burdened by its past. The world of tech was slow to evolve, but he knew this was just the start. He would embrace this challenge to keep the momentum going, fueling the desire to empower voices long sheltered under the heavy shroud of silence. As he stood there, he understood he was no longer acting out of fear. He was thriving in the light of possibility. This truly was his moment. Now that you've witnessed this remarkable journey of transformation, you need to subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us share these powerful narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about how Alex's story unfolds. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this journey to fulfillment and change. This is the moment to show your support.